Welcome to the Spire Director's Commentary podcast, recorded by Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. Following a successful Kickstarter campaign, we agreed to record commentary for each chapter of the Spire RPG, a fantasy punk game about insurrection, oppression, and horror, and release it to our backers. We wanted to talk about the decisions that led us to design Spire the way we did and show our working as best as possible. What you are about to listen to is a podcast made up of those files, arranged into blocks an hour or so long. We encourage you to start from episode 1 and move forward from there. In this episode, we cover the book's introduction, the base elements of the setting, the core mechanics that power the game, and the skills and domain system. Christopher.
Grant.
Talk to me about equipment.
So equipment is an odd duck in Spire.
Yes.
Originally, one of the design tenets was that we wanted it to work around resource management.
Yes.
Not like an RTS game level of resource management, but that you've got to think a lot about what you...
But like funding the revolution.
Yeah. So the weapons kind of fell into the background a little bit, as we were looking mainly at the resource of having weapons, rather than the resource of what weapons you have.
Chris, do you remember the brilliant system we had around? We didn't have ranks of damage. We had a description of what the weapon did to you.
Yes.
So we had like a knife did kill.
Yep.
And what a knife does was a tool that allowed you to kill, and it was up to you to put more damage on that and roll better. Like, we never really got anywhere with it.
I still think that system's interesting, and it can be used.
It was really interesting, and also we had like penetrate. So like a weapon which has the penetrate tag could knock through armor, and then we ended up having sort of like penetrate, kill for a high damage penetrating weapon, and it rather got away from us, I think.
Yes.
But I really like the idea.
But definitely
I love the idea of having, like, a sword has the words kill and parry.
Yep.
That's like, rather than saying it does d6 damage, and it's all about your own... Anyway, carry on, sorry.
We'll come back to that.
I think that was iteration 7.
Yeah, of 600. But then we kind of realised that, you know what, people like fun weapons.
We like fun weapons.
We like fun weapons.
Me especially.
Everybody likes fun weapons. So we came up with the tag system and created ourselves some interesting weapons. And I love the tag system for building weapons.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's extrapolated from lessons learned from Apocalypse World.
Yeah.
We don't quite work in quite such a narrative way as Apocalypse World does, but you can certainly see the roots of it. And I think, like, one thing which we struggle to do, like, it's fairly easy to come up with descriptions for weapons because you tend to get quite granular with that, but it's fairly difficult to come up with equipment for anything else other than it lets you do the thing, because you tend to have more detailed rules for combat, you tend to have more detailed rules around that, and also, like, just as a role-playing designer, I'm used to that. So I'm used to thinking in those ways, and we really struggled to come up with, like, how do we make interesting rules for a horse and cart, for example?
Yeah.
Not that there are many in Spire, but, like, or a perfume. And so we really struggled for that, and once you start doing that, you end up sort of having to write down the entire world.
Yes,
and that can be quite difficult. And so, like, we had levels of items initially. So those of you who read the Blood and Dust preview adventure will see that we've changed that system now. I think the idea was that if it was a higher level than you rolled with 1 difficulty, and if you were a higher level than it, you rolled with +1 dice. I think it was along those lines. But it just felt a bit gamey.
It felt very heavy in a system that didn't feel heavy everywhere else.
Yeah, it felt strapped on, and, like, it kind of did the thing in that I quite like that we had levels of equipment, and so you could say, well, like, this is level 4 equipment, so it's shit hot.
Yeah.
And we've, like, either we've saved up and got that, or we found it, or we got it for, like, we took it off someone's corpse, or we've been given it by a benevolent patron. But it just didn't quite ring. And the game is very much not about equipment.
No.
And so we have a very simple rule in that you just describe what you've got. And if it matters to you, then you get to roll with mastery when you do the thing that it's good at. And so it's more of a conversation between you and the GM. Yeah. And it's not like, the thing is, like, you can actually use those rules for weapons. We say in the book, weapons and armor have slightly more complex rules detailed below. However, if you don't want to get too in-depth on combat, you can certainly use the above rules for weapons too. So you could certainly have, I have a pistol, which is very accurate but very loud. Yeah,
and you can run it very story game from that angle.
But we like tags, and I love writing big books of weapons because I grew up on Warhammer, I grew up on Dark Heresy, I grew up on bestiaries and equipment books, and I get a bit excited, especially when an equipment book. There is a Dark Heresy splat book called the Inquisitor's Handbook, which was the second thing that Black Library released before it got taken off. And that is it's mainly just a list of equipment, a book of equipment, but all of it like refers to a certain world or a certain cult or a certain social element of the game. And that really fascinates me, because it's not just like, here is rules for a bow. It's, here is rules for this bow from this culture, from this world, and here's why it's interesting.
Really drills down into the specific.
Yeah, it's still fairly dry, but it explains that through the mechanics of the game in saying, here is a weapon, you can have that, and that's what shows you what's important. And Dark Heresy is actually a game about equipment, really, at the end of the day. And we're not.
No.
What's your favourite tag, Christopher?
I quite like Scarring.
In that it's only fiction.
It's only fiction. But if I have to pick a specific...
that's fine.
To pick a specific one with mechanical benefits, whatever. It's Bloodbound and Conduit.
Yes, one which you get more accurate with a weapon and therefore more hurty if you mark stress to either your blood or your mind.
Yes.
Conduit's nice. Yeah. I really like double-barreled.
Obviously.
Just because there's something quite charming about it. I think probably my favourite one is surprising. So the rules for surprising are: the first time you use this weapon in a situation, roll with mastery. So it means that you get a proper opener to things. Like surprising is a really weird weapon. Like, we wrote a really weird tag. We wrote it intending almost like a hidden blade or a concealed weapon.
Yes.
Or like the sort of like a sword cane. Oh, I didn't expect you to have a weapon there, and so we simulate that by having once that element of surprise is over, then the weapon is just a normal thing. But we've also got it on the knight's lance.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because it's surprising in that you're not expecting some bastard to run at you on foot with a lance. And so it's like fighting someone who's never fought before, in that it's like you don't know how to read their language.
Yes.
In that way. So that's kind of fun. I really like surprising. One thing I'd actually like to mention as well, for a very long time we had a mechanic in the game called control.
Yes.
So it was a core idea of the game, was I wanted to have the combat system and also any sort of tense, dangerous situation you were in, whether it's like an argument or an infiltration or whatever. It wasn't about just rolling the numbers and doing the thing, but it was about how much control you had over the situation. And if you think in terms of like, let's say, police breaking up a riot, that sort of thing. If they just run in and hit people, that's not going to work. What they need to do is control. So like they cut off escape routes, they kettle people in, they get them into a state where they will calm down, and that's kettling. You've also got things like smoke grenades. You've got things like water cannons. I'm sorry, I'm not espousing riot breakers as a good thing, but it is interesting to look at how you control that situation. Also things like how you control lines of sight and cover and flanking routes.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to have, rather than, so it was a bit less. It was more of it was an attempt to recreate a tactical war game just through a number which went up and down.
Yes.
And it didn't quite work.
No, it proved clumsy.
We had about 3 iterations of it, and like the reason why I remembered it is because we used to have the spears had reach, and that was I think the rule was when you have control, when your control is positive, inflict double damage.
Yes.
And because that was implying that you had them where you wanted them. We also had things like you could do things like take -5 control to do to do plus damage when you had a big unwieldy weapon, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was a shifting scale, kind of in the middle of the table.
Yeah,
it was one group or the other.
Yeah, and it didn't quite function. And again, like I think there's legs there. I think there's something interesting to be had around that, because I really like the idea of control, but I hate the idea of actually having to model that in a non-abstract form.
Yeah, and it just doesn't fit with Spire.
No, and like it did when it was more of an espionage game.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But now, now it's much more story focused. Yeah, that's equipment.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the table on the last page, you can see the huge quantities of guns and armor we put into the game.
Yeah, and
the whole point of it is that you build your own.
Yeah, and also like we've got them attached to NPCs.
Yeah.
Is the other thing, and I guess it lets us release a splat book with weapons later on.
It does. But you can see that like a lot of things don't do a high amount of stress.
No.
And that's because you don't need to do a high amount of stress to cause fallout.
No, and also if the average person who is not trained in combat, he's not an agent of the ministry, probably has about 3 stress points before they just fuck off.
Yeah.
Or before they die, or before they're out the story. That you just have to influence them that much, and then they're out the story. And like honestly, rolling big numbers isn't super useful for most of the game.
No.
You're much better off getting equipment which gives you mastery in other ways, or letting you, or like having skills which boost equipment is much better than having equipment which boosts skills.
Yeah, and one thing I've found during playtesting is that a lot of people grow quite attached to the weapons they already have. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that was something which we really wanted to explore and play around with, was like, even though you're growing in power, we wanted to try and keep the same trope, the same contacts, and the same equipment that you had coming up once you hit the top.
Yeah,
because
when you got a greatsword, a greatsword is a greatsword.
Yeah,
there's no real magic guns.
It's great.
So you might as well have a greatsword. It's fine.
Yeah, and one of the things which kind of bothers me about D&D rules as written is the way that there's kind of a rotating cycle of equipment which just goes through. When you get a better X, you upgrade to it.
Yeah, and you essentially throw the old one away.
Like that really works in computer games, because it gives you more visual interest, it gives you more mechanics, it gives you a draw to come back in, and I really like that. But in a game where we're telling stories about the same group of people, and there's a togetherness and a platform thing, I want everyone to have a trusty knife, as it were.
Yes.
Or a named sword, that sort of thing. Maybe not a named gun, because that's creepy.
It's a bit, though. I mean, there's a subculture of people who actually do that. In the game.
I mean, like if you want to join the Church of the Gun, you have to name your gun. That's equipment.
Yeah.
I think that brings us. So next up we have bonds, and we'll put a break in there, then we'll talk about bonds.
All right.
Welcome to bonds. We used to call these assets.
Yes, because people are the things.
People are things. One of the biggest tropes we wanted to talk about in the game was, what if you start treating people like things? And we ended up as more of a fictional concern than a mechanical concern, but Bond is where it survived. We also had assets with things like safe houses and equipment, and money was an asset. And we wanted to have people as things, and the idea is that you're pushing all of these into the revolution, and what comes out, at some point, your espionage campaign, and at some point, treating people as things has negative ramifications, at least for them.
Yeah.
But that fell by the wayside, and we streamlined, and we worked out what sort of stories we wanted to tell.
It was very bookkeeping.
It was hugely bookkeeping, my God, yeah. And just not...
So
what was it? We had... they had their own skill list.
Yep.
Bonds had... I think it was something like 30 or 40 skills, which you would assign to a Bond, and then they could do the thing. Which was a really lovely means of saying what a bit like in the last chapter when we're saying how like knives had kill. One of like we had was it berry was one of the keywords in that they can bury corpses or eat corpses or just like get rid of stuff, infiltrate, guard, scry, investigate, that sort of thing. And one of the problems which I find, the more details you put in a game, you end up saying no more commonly than you say yes.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, and like you've got a GM, you've got access to a very powerful computer in terms of running games, in that you have someone's brain and they can think on the fly and they can make their own judgments, in that humans don't need rules, we can have guidelines. And that is, you can entrust a lot up to the GM rather than saying, oh no, you can't do that. So like, oh, I really want to talk to my guy about to see if he knows anyone in his area. Oh no, he doesn't have the know anyone in his area skill.
Whereas so, can go, yeah, I reckon you might know that.
Yeah, why not? And oh well, you know what? He doesn't talk to a lot of people, so I'm going to say like he doesn't roll because this is his skill. This isn't his area of expertise. But he rolls plus 1d10 because it's in their neighbourhood. Go.
Yeah.
And you roll the dice. And bonds, as you mentioned in the stress chapter, just work like normal stresses. They work like resistances.
Yeah.
And that means that they accrue stress, and eventually they end up dying. Because no one refreshes the stress off their bonds.
No, they always forget they can do it.
They always forget they can do it, and also they're really busy, and they're generally bleeding to death.
Yeah.
So like they've got their own shit going on. And actually, I think it's like I'm actually kind of glad for that, because what a bond is, it's a place to put free stress.
Yeah.
In that you ask them to go and do it, and they do it in downtime off camera, and then that problem's solved.
Well, the thing for me that really excites me about bonds is it's our version of magic items.
Yeah.
You earn bonds by what you do in the game. You start off with a couple.
Yeah.
But when you befriend the local blood witch, you can earn her as a bond.
Yeah.
And now you've just expanded both your repertoire and you've given yourself more places to dump stress into.
Yeah, the team's repertoire as well.
Yep.
You can ask them to do things, and generally, like, the rule we've got is, like, they will do things for you, but they'll be bad at it and they'll take more damage if it's dangerous or they're not good at it.
Yeah.
And so it more leaves it up to the player, like, how much do you want to hurt them? Like, what's the risk reward on this one? The other thing about bonds I should note is that it's possible to have PC bonds, which you will have noticed if you play through Blood and Dust. You have at the start of a game, each character has a bond with another PC, and then when you help out a character you have a bond with, you roll with mastery once per scene. I'll be honest with you, that rule is largely boring and only there to justify giving them the bond, because those bonds are brilliant.
Yeah. Having
players establish those, because it lets you establish a fact about another NPC, but one that reflects on you. So let's say, for example, the Lejean background is you helped someone deal with illness or addiction. Say what and how you helped.
Yep.
The idle one is the Vimissian Sage is you know a secret about someone. Say who, what the secret is, and whether they know you know. The idle says that you know someone has fallen for you. And so it gives you these little character spikes which you set up, and like I've heard of groups spend their entire session 0 just hashing those out.
Yeah, because it's fun.
It is fun, and it just sort of like it takes pressure off the table to do things in media res. You can just throw around ideas, and then it lets you establish those connections, and then those connections come and play out afterwards. And it's just a really nice way of doing that. I think. The idea, it's not a new idea. They're very, I think most famously done in Dungeon World, in that you have a connection with another player. But most of those are, I think this about them,
yes,
or I have done this for them, rather than they think this about me.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't build bridges. People. Yeah. And I think that that as well, like right off the bat, one thing which Chris and I quite enjoy in role-playing games is when there's a distance between the character and the player.
Yes.
And so once you put in that distance, it encourages players to scene frame. It encourages them to put their characters in trouble, which makes more exciting stories. Like, fuck it, why not? Let's go and do the dangerous thing because it sounds like an interesting story, rather than I don't think my character would do that.
I think your character bloody would.
Because it's more interesting. And like, you know, there's a level of trust in there and a level of control. But I think if the first thing you do in the game after you pick your powers and you pick your endurance, you pick your class, is you establish something about another player character. And we have that little intrusion into your character's headspace, and just say you don't get full control over your character. Sometimes things are going to happen which you are, and like you can always say, oh, actually, I'm not comfortable with that, and I think that's true of anything that happens in any role playing game. You know,
yeah, always.
If you're repeatedly uncomfortable, don't play the game anymore. That sort of thing. But having that established right off the bat means that people are then perhaps a little bit ready for it later on when we do things like when you pick up the tired fallout from blood stress and miss something, or when you pick the lie fallout in Reputation and have to tell a lie.
It also sets up the players being able to inform the GM of certain things in a sort of, I think I might know somebody from that district because I've come there from a backstory.
Yeah.
They're more ready to say that because they've already said, well, you've fallen in love with me because of this reason. Yeah.
And I think quite nicely as well, it lets we wanted classes to have spotlight time. And which is why I think every class has a once per session do a thing. And it's like generally pretty powerful or pretty useful, or in the knight's case, you just find a bar, but it's still kind of fun. Like it lets you have spotlight, and I think the bond system lets you do that spotlight before the game starts. It sort of lets you teach the other players when you're discussing it and say, hey, this is what I do. I help people. Hey, this is what I do. I drink.
This is my thing.
Yeah. Hey, I set up deals. That sort of thing, and it gives you almost like a little mechanic-free tutorial for what your character's about.
Yeah,
and we'll end it there.
We will.
So we are now getting on to the bit which Chris and I like most, which is characters.
The chunky, meaty bit.
Chunky, juicy chunks and wonderful gravy. My favourite bit of the player's handbook in Dungeons and Dragons is reading through the classes and seeing and like imagining what I could do with these classes. Yeah. Pathfinder does it really well, actually. I will say I'm not a huge fan of Pathfinder systemically, but I really like the way you have your base character, and then as you grow up through that, you've got various different paths and routes you can take to add more details, and you've got talents you can pick, and so you can have your own character in that way. And it's, for someone who reads as many role-playing books as I do, I find it tremendously good fun to just imagine things that could happen.
Yeah, considering you'll literally never have enough time to play them all.
No, certainly it's not physically possible. So, let's talk about advancing. It says how to advance a character.
Okay.
This, I think we talked about in a previous example, this turned up quite late. This was a playtester who came up with this mechanic. Mm-hmm. And we certainly mentioned it in the book. I forget whether we mentioned it earlier in this podcast, in this show. It comes out of change. It was a woman called Lisa Trott, one of the playtesters, who came up with this idea. And up until then, we were just sort of doing it ad hoc, like when the GM decides you level up, you level up.
Yeah, because we've sort of always played D&D in that way.
Yeah.
Rather than tracking every experience point, we've done it like, well, you've finished an adventure, that'll do one level.
Yeah.
Well, you killed a big thing, that'll do another.
And like World of Darkness, for the other sort of, I suppose, like the base game which I grew up playing, or at least I cut my teeth on, it's very much up to the GM. In terms of like how many points you're assigned for role playing well, and for finishing an arc or finishing a story, and it's like, well, I'm used to the GM handing out that advancement, but I think that we wanted something a bit more concrete in this, and this feels interesting. It also means that you're going to change Spire. Like Spire is going to get different.
Whether for the better or not is entirely up to you, but...
Which is quite challenging.
Yeah.
In a way. Especially, like, we wrote a book with that in mind. And the idea is that we wrote this book, and then the idea is players are going to come along and fuck it up.
Just poop all over it.
Yeah. Which is great, because it makes it theirs, you know? But it's certainly different. I think that it almost sort of... It does mean that sometimes advancement comes as a surprise.
Yes.
To people, because they're like, oh, I didn't realise that was so important. And I think that one of the ways you can say is to talk to people about their aims and then discuss what kind of advances that would bring.
Yeah.
As you play, so sort of to tease that reward for them, as it were.
I think one of my favourite way of giving out advances is to use it as a confusion tactic.
Go on.
So what you want to do is, after the players are just let's say the players have done something to piss somebody off.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, that doesn't sound like an advancement point.
Mm-hmm.
Just like they've just annoyed somebody.
Yeah.
But at the end of the session, you say, "Cool," and you'll get an advancement for changing spire.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, you'll find out.
You've done something this session that has provoked major change within spire.
Yeah.
And then they go, congrats. God, what have we done?
Yeah, that's fun. Like you just play them the ominous music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the classic trope of the GM just starts laughing.
Yeah, or rolling dice behind a screen with no particular aim in mind.
It's that, but they get a reward.
Yeah, I can dig it. That's kind of fun, actually.
It's nice to just go to watch them go. What did we do that last session? What have we done that's kicked off a chain of events that's promoted change?
Yeah,
and then they look a little bit closer at what's been happening. It's very interesting.
That's nice. We've got Durance up, which is a fairly late thing to come into the game.
Yep.
So the concept of Durance has existed for many years. For many iterations. The idea that you serve a durance or a period of unpaid work for your high elf masters. We settled on 4 years because that lets you play young characters.
Yeah.
Who are also free agents. That means that you're not all currently unpaid servants, or I suppose slaves is a difficult word, and we do
have a box out about
that. We discussed that. Like, durance is not slavery. Durance is short-term slavery. Slavery still exists.
Yes.
And it just didn't quite feel... We didn't feel comfortable telling that story. Slavery is a thing that exists in this, as it does in pretty much every fantasy setting, and also the real world.
Yeah, and it's awful.
And it's awful, and we don't like it. And I think that if you wanted to lead into it, you could easily have your Elfir enslave Drow for longer, and have it as more of a full lifetime dominion, as it were.
Yeah.
But I think we wanted to give people a bit more of a free license to dick about.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to play the game. In that system, because there's no freedom of information travel.
Yeah, there's no freedom of movement. You have to justify everything to your masters, and if you no longer have a master, but you're very pissed off with them, then it puts you in an excellent position to rebel.
Yeah.
And so the durances are what you did for your Elfir lord while they employed you, and so we did a few drafts of these.
Yeah.
We moved through, but one of the things about our characters is, because it's a class-based system, you don't end up with a great deal of variety between starting characters. And certainly they tell their own stories and they pick up their own advances, but starting Azurite, you have a limited number of options that you can pick mechanically. You can certainly, when you create a character, you're entitled to 2 low advances, and that's it as far as your character advances go, and then you pick up other things as you go, and so they can feel similar, having 2 Azurites. But if you have one Azurite who was an information broker and one Azurite who was a killer, that's a very different story.
Yeah, it completely changes the paradigm you're looking at the class through.
Yeah, and I think my favourite thing is to pick a completely contrasting durance for a character.
Yeah, if you want to make a killer, don't pick the killer durance.
Yeah. Or for example, put the killer durance on a masked character. Don't put killer on a knight or a bound character. People who are already doing that. At that point, then, like, because that isn't like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, oh, that seems like a natural progression. I can see why you got to that. So I like having it as a surprise. Also, it broadens out your character, which is nice.
Yeah. And I mean, my favourite durance is the most boring one.
Which one's that?
Labourer.
+2 blood resist.
It's so juicy.
Tough as nails.
Just rock hard because you've constantly worked in the enormous factories. You've got the garden district. But anything in my book, anything that gives me resist is amazing.
Chris really likes numbers.
I'm a big fan of numbers.
Chris loves a number, so that +2 blood there and resist is really juicy for him.
Yeah, stick that with a blood witch or a midwife.
Yeah, that's the other thing as well. So, like, blood witches are spending blood to... Well, they're marking stress against blood to cast. So having a labourer blood witch, just strictly mechanically, that's a really good thing to have. The other thing we've got as well here is we've got non-durance durances.
Yes, if you haven't done a durance.
Yeah, and these are less detailed. But we also, like, we didn't want everyone to have to tell the same story. So if you want to have, fled the call when the durance when the guard come around and collect young drow for durance, then you can do that. We've got things like joined a cult or two, spent your time in jail, helped the ministry wage the war. So if you want, you can just double down and be a minister. As you've been in it for life, you were born into it in some way.
Yeah.
There are lots of fun things you can do around this, and I think these are like the in Blood and Dust. The idol had fell in with a gang of thieves as her durance, and it lends a really nice twist to her.
Yeah, because it gives you these skills that are just completely disparate.
Yeah,
and just like, come on, out of the way, I can do this. What?
Which come as a surprise, which I really like, because like seeing as she fell in with a gang of thieves, she can do things like sneak into places rather than just having to idle her way in, which is really nice, and it gives you that little it gives you a little twist at the start. I think my favourite one is Hunter, because it has the word minarets in it.
So many instances of the word minarets.
I keep writing it and you keep shooting it down, and that's fine. Okay. I understand. But I really love the phrase minarets, and I love the idea you hunted wild beasts around the minarets of the upper spire, and just sort of like, it doesn't say whether they're flying or not, so I was imagining like leaping off and strangling a boar, that sort of thing.
But also, this is another one of those little hooks that we drop in all over the place. We don't mention the wild beasts around the minarets in the upper spire.
No, I guess, I mean, like we mentioned that there's birds, and we mentioned that there's hyenas, but not that there's, like, something worth hunting.
Yeah.
I guess there's pheasants.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's up to you.
Yeah.
And there's always, there's all these little hooks all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, we are going to move on to the classes next, so we're going to end this section, and then we'll deal with the Azurite.
The Azurite.
Hello, welcome back, and welcome to Azurite. This is the first of the classes. It begins with A, so we put it at the top.
Yeah, we're good like that.
We're good like that. The Azurite, the name of the Azurite is solely there because it sounds cool. Initially, they were just traders. We just had them as traders or like money people, and it wasn't really doing much, and they weren't really selling anything. And I was like, what if they wore blue? And that's kind of the fundamental nature.
We're like, yes, core concept of class.
Brilliant, wear blue, I love it. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Can I just say as well, I love the golden nose on Eddie's drawing.
It's so nice.
Absolutely beautiful. Obviously, Adrian Stone is our artist who did all the art through the book. The copy we're looking at doesn't have all the final pieces in yet, but I will try and discuss them as and when they come up. But yes, lovely golden nose. I like how, and also just how swathed the Azurite is.
Yeah. So the Azurite is is an interesting class to start on, because it doesn't really have a slot in the generic RPG class system.
No, like Bard, I guess, maybe. But even
it's
Bard
closer
doesn't
to
have a
Bard.
slot. Like, you don't really want a Bard in your party either.
But you are literally a merchant.
Yeah.
That's your class. You're trading.
You're a wizard.
Yes. You're... One of the things about Spire is that a lot of things are bound up in religion.
Yes. You're a cleric.
Yeah, and this is a cleric of commerce.
Yeah, not like strictly money or gold, but commerce. It's about trading. So we've got. I will say, I'm very happy that some of the standard equipment for the Azurite is girdles. 3 sets of beautiful girdles. But they also they're the only class you can have a bodyguard. And like we just sort of kind of snuck this rule in. Like, it doesn't quite gel with the rest of the system, but it's such a lovely image.
Yeah.
That I've never been comfortable about taking it out of the game. It's really lovely to have like just someone who does all that for you while you do the talking.
Yeah, and it's kind of like having a Bond person who fights.
Yeah, pretty much.
But you take all the fallout, not them.
Yeah, and we represent the fact that you can't just use them all day by giving them the tiring ability. So like they sort of get tired and give up, or like they value their own lives, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, you can always pick up another weapon and do it yourself.
Yeah, and like if anyone's set to buy a weapon, it's the Azurite.
Yes, being able to just set up a deal anywhere.
Yeah, I want to buy your gun that you're pointing at me right now. Oh, okay, I guess so.
I mean, give us a tenner.
Yeah. Yes, the Azurite's been knocking around for a wee while. I was really struggling with what to do with them. I remember if I ever felt particularly confused about a class, I would take the class to the pub, and I would go and sit down with my notebook in the pub with a pint and try and work out what the fuck we were supposed to do with them. And when we got so what we had initially, the Azurite was a trader, and they could, if they wanted, get access to the spells of Azur. We used to have all the spells listed separately from the classes.
Yes, we used to have a proper old school spell list.
And like they were still like done per god or per occult school, and then what you would do is advances in your class would give you access to those spell lists. But it was a kind of a dead level, so we didn't like that very much.
Yeah, we don't do dead levels.
Yeah, and also it meant it was quite boring to read the classes. So we just ended up syncing the class. We ended up syncing the spells directly in and offering up multi-classing instead. That seemed like the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. And
most now of the spells, most of the abilities in the game are divine. They are, or I'd say at least half.
Yeah, for sure.
They come from worship of a god or a concept, and the Azurites are one of them. I think like my favorite thing about them is that they can buy stuff that isn't physical objects.
They can buy concepts, essentially.
They can buy concepts. So you can buy a domain, you can buy a language, you can buy a skill, you can buy friends. The high level advance is buy some time, in that you travel back in time a minute. And then you have to, if you travel back in time and then stop yourself from casting by some time, you both start taking enormous amounts of stress until one of you dies, which I like.
Yeah, and like the other high level ability, buy anything.
Yes,
buy anything is interesting because it's a heal spell.
Yeah, pretty much. You can
buy stress marks off people.
And the fun part of buy anything is you can set it up so it goes on a contingency, and that lets you basically make deals with anyone for anything, and that's really useful and fun to set up. Like, if you do this, I will sell you this.
Yeah,
and that it positions them also as a middleman, which they are. They're a trader, they're a merchant. They don't make things; they move things.
But they're interestingly very in sync with the theme of Spire, in that it's about gaining something and then coming out on top.
Yeah, that's how they refresh as well. We should actually briefly talk about refreshing.
Yes.
So refresh is the most powerful way you have to remove stress. You can remove stress by laying low, as we call it, and that means that you exclude yourself from scenes, or you say that you're not doing anything for a while, and the plot moves ahead without you. But that lets you just sort of recover either your reputation, accrue more money for silver, wait until the heat dies down for shadow, physically heal for blood, that sort of thing. You can take actions which regenerate which clear stress off you. So let's say, for example, you want to go and repair your reputation by going and volunteering in the local soup kitchens, or doing something useful for someone who's a figurehead in the community, that sort of thing. But refresh lets you clear any stress from any kind of resistance you've got it logged up in, just by doing what your character does, doing what your class does.
Yeah, by reinforcing that theme once again.
Yeah, and it's a pretty basic push-pull mechanic, really. But the refresh for the Azurite is carry out a deal that benefits you more than it does the other party, and that is if your Azurite isn't doing that at least once per session, they're wrong. They missed the memo on that one.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got the core ability cut a deal, so that once per session you can set up a meet with an NPC who can acquire you pretty much anything.
Yeah,
you've got no excuse not to trade up.
And that makes sense. And like their the other once per situation, pick an NPC that you can observe for a while. The GM will tell you what they want most of all right now. That's just a really useful thing to be able to set up future scenes.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff we've had around like the once per situation stuff, when you intuit stuff, it lets you know, but doesn't tell you how to act on it or give you any proof.
Yes, which is really interesting with some people's core abilities.
Yeah, so like the city guard ability is like, you know what crime they're guilty of, but you have no proof. And like the other thing as well is, when we wrote these intuitive information about an NPC or about a situation, at no point did we want the GM to say, "Oh, they haven't committed a crime; they're not guilty." It's like, no, now they've committed a crime.
Make it up. You got about 5 seconds to make it up.
Now they want something. What do they want most of all? And that lets you sort of insert your if you view the characters as a crowbar, this is you inserting them into the plot.
Yeah,
I like Azurites. They tend to come off as a bit mercenary, which makes sense for the God of Gaul, and so like I think that there's a little bit of a rub back. That's sort of phrase. A little bit of a juxtaposition with the ideals of the ministry. The ministry is fairly selfless and nihilistic, and these guys are very much out for themselves to get money. But you can futz with it and be like, well, actually, any money I get is therefore the ministry's money.
Yeah,
and so I'm prepared to give everything.
And also, like a freer, more open market.
Yeah, definitely
is better for an Azurite, even if they are playing the selfish angle. That's fine.
I think my favourite Azurite ability is the one where you buy skills for other, you can buy them for other people. Yeah. And that means that like the Azurite, we had an Azurite in a playtest I was playing, and it was really nice because before a difficult scene, the Azurite would sit the person down and say, "Okay, what do you need?" "Oh, I'd really like the ability to climb walls." "1 second, mate," and just went off and bought it. And then granted it to them.
I think I like on the toss of a coin.
Oh, that makes everything 50-50.
Makes whatever you do a coin flip.
Yeah.
Either like heads it goes really well, or tails it goes really badly.
Yeah.
But you can boil everything down to a flip of a coin if you want to.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of going up against like your big nemesis, and then just going, well, we've done all this prep, we've done all this. Shit, it's not working.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Flips a coin.
Just like you get rushed by the paladins, and it's like, okay, I'm going to blind them. I've got a 50-50 chance each time I toss this coin of getting out of this. Fine.
Yeah.
But it gives you a superpower which has a huge risk attached to it.
It's beautiful.
Fun. Let's move on. So next up we have the Bound. The Bound are a order of vigilantes, a sort of Batmen. Batsmen?
Batsmen. I like batsmen.
Batsmen. Who patrol Perch, which is one of my favourite districts. Perch is an area... it's kind of a shanty town. It's near the top of the spire. I think it's underneath New Heaven. And the idea is that it's been nailed on and bolted on and tied on to the side of spire, and bits of it keep dropping off. Like, it's really horrible. Like it's not dank like Derelictus is,
No,
and
it's airy, and
it's not crimey like Red Row is, but it falls off a lot more than any other low society place.
Yeah, and there's very little permanence in Perch.
Yeah,
which is where one of the things that the Bound works off.
So we got a suggestion from Mary, one of our business partner and wife partner in my case, and we were chatting about other religions that we wanted to explore and sort of draw on to look into religions in Spire, because we've got some fairly Catholic vibes going throughout a lot of our religion.
Yeah.
And so we're interested in drawing, so I suppose like Catholic via voodoo, which is kind of where voodoo's via Catholicism anyway. But point is, we were interested in Shinto as a religion and exploring that, and the idea that there are small gods that live in the things.
Yeah.
Chris, you've always been interested in the idea of genius loci as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really interesting. And one of the really early things we did with the Bound is we'd actually named the gods.
Had we?
We had. I found this document. But the gods were down to blade, rope, bottle.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, I remember now.
And there were two others, and I can't remember. They were specific things that had gods in them.
Yeah.
And we kind of kept that. You'll notice through the powers. Like, there's a lot of stuff that interacts with bottles, ropes, and knives. There were two others: armor, and another one.
Like matches, cigarettes.
Oh, and flame.
Flame, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we wanted, we wanted to try and bring down the idea of the Bound is that they've got everything they have on them.
Yes.
Like, they're carrying around their lives,
because there's no permanence in Perch. Yeah. What you have on you is of utmost importance, because your house could just fall into the ether.
Yeah. And so there's that sort of self-sufficiency is fun, but also drawing power from their items and having a lot of the powers that the Bound has are quite, in Mage the Awakening terms, coincidental.
Yes.
It's very rare that they are doing outright miracles.
They'll start falling and their armor will catch them.
Yeah. Or let's say, for example, the Saint of Binding, your rope god dances and twists for you. Your rope animates as if of its own accord, tripping your enemies. You could just be pretty tricky with your wrist, you know?
Yeah, you know how to use a lasso.
Yeah, and that's fairly interesting. You will also note that they have the coolest named powers in the game.
Secret saints and gods.
I forget how far we've gotten through before we decided on that. But the idea that there's almost every Bound is his or her or their own cult. That they're understanding their own mysteries and going through. The other thing as well, they have a Bound blade, so they have a god which they've trapped in the blade. And I think the idea is that everything else, the gods are naturally occurring.
Yes.
If you have a rope and you take care of it, there will be a god in that rope. And they're almost the god finds it, or the rope generates its own god, but you treat it well and it treats you well. For the blade, you found a different god and pushed it in there because it was more powerful than the one that was already living in it. And that was something which we just happened organically, really. Yeah, but I wanted to give them a bit of an edge.
And it's nice because you've got one of the things about Bound is they're in control. They're very much a control class.
Go on.
If you look, they've got the ability to blend into scenery, to essentially stealth. They can lock doors. They can control.
They can unlock doors.
They can unlock doors. They can move pretty much anywhere when you get up to high level abilities. Got a perch, you can walk on any solid surface that is flat ground.
The thing that I think one of my favourite powers from them is the Saint of Ways. In that, when you wear your gloves was another one. When you wear your gloves and try to open the door, that door is unlocked and unbarred.
It just is.
It just is, and that for me is, I think, it's very unflashy, but actually now locks don't exist to you.
Yeah,
that's a fascinating. And it doesn't work on chests. It doesn't work on bureaus or windows, but Oh no, windows are fine, but just like anything which allows physical access, you can just get in now, and so like it just lets you appear.
Yeah, but
which I should note is also their once possession power.
Yes, but coming from this place of control, you've got the god blades, the bound blades.
Yeah, that's true.
Which are barely restrained, and almost scary.
Yeah.
Like it goes all the way up to the god of slaughter, which is the furious god in your blade is barely restrained and grows more powerful with each new sacrifice. Like everything else is like, you've always got a cigarette. And this is like, you've got a knife that wants to kill.
Yeah. And that's the thing, if you inflict blood stress with your blade on a mortal target, you kill them. And it bypasses most of the combat rules.
Yeah.
So we had that in a playtest, and it was at that point all the Bound had to do was get past armor.
Yes.
And then he got to describe whatever horrendous thing he did.
That's the joy of high abilities. They're so far up the chain that you don't really play like a whole campaign with a high ability.
No. There's something sort of downhill finale about them.
Yes, like when you start getting high abilities, you suddenly realise, hang on, I'm going to have to use these because they matter.
Yeah, and also very few of the high level abilities. Oh, great! I'm really glad I had to use this.
Yeah, it's generally brutal and nasty.
They all come with, most of them come with horrendous costs, Anyway, it's I really like the Bound. I think we didn't really know what we were doing with them, and then we hit playtest and we started to actually feel that we'd done something really interesting.
Yeah, people seem to latch onto the Bound quite quickly.
Yeah,
which I find interesting.
They're quite good. They're quite a good way of having weirdos in the game as well.
Yeah, but like with the previous one we discussed, the Azurite, that's for a certain kind of mindset.
Yeah,
that's for the mastermind. You know, for the maneuverer.
Yeah.
The Bound is for a different kind of person.
A rogue.
A rogue
who likes demonology, I guess.
Yeah. But like it can go combat, it can go social in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely some social stuff, like in the early levels, like, and then you sort of become more and more dangerous and weird.
Yeah. And I like that we've provided those different avenues for those different brain types.
Yes, definitely. Let's move on. So next up we have fan favourite class. The Carrion-Priest. Who is they used to be called the Muashim Alphas.
Yes.
And that was back, and so that they worshipped. They were the Muashim, who were a sect which worshipped the god of Charnel. And we sort of hit the point where we realised that every other class was, if not instantly understandable, at least pronounceable.
Yes.
And Muashim Alpha just didn't feel like a thing. Like Azurite feels like a thing. And Muashim Alpha didn't. And so we changed the name to Carrion-Priest. And that also meant that I got to give them a load of stupid new abilities, like turning into birds and summoning birds.
Yep.
But they're fun. They are, I think, like, more so than the two classes we discussed previously, they are a product of the society. And I'd like you to talk about that, Christopher.
Yeah, so New Heaven is a kind of split in its worship of death cults. Mm-hmm. You've got the Morticians on one hand,
who are like Catholic priests
who worship Meror,
but more goth,
which is the god of death. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the Carrion-Priests who follow Charnel. Mm-hmm. And it's a more bestial religion. And they've released their sacred beast hyenas into New Heaven so that they're a natural species.
Well,
so that now they are, essentially.
Yes. They've started breeding, and by having that central division, it was something which sort of let us think about the different sects available in Spire. And so it's like the Morticians are more about defeating death or controlling death, and the Carrion-Priests are more about embracing death
and accepting it,
honouring it, and like, you know, both are valid. But the Morticians, like, one of the first classes that I wrote up actually was a Mortician. And we wrote it down. It was pretty cool. They felt a bit like witch hunters, a bit like Inquisitor, almost. We made it all happen, and it was like, but these are the guys in charge.
Mm.
Like they were the state effectively, and they didn't feel very satisfying to play them. I can definitely see their rules cropping up in a later source book.
Sure, but they didn't feel core.
No, and also we couldn't have a group with a Carrion-Priest and Mortician in it.
Yeah, which is
that
just
felt a bit
annoying.
Yeah, and so we set them off to one side. We took out their powers and shuffled them amongst the other classes, and we kept the Carrion-Priest, because the Carrion-Priest gets a fucking hyena.
He does. Just quickly, you said that we shuffled the powers out to the other
classes.
We have a document that is just cast off bits that we've cut out of all the other classes, just waiting for a new thing.
It's our bits box, as it were, of spells and abilities, and they're organised. They're organised by level, whether that's low, medium, or high, and they're just ready to go in there. And we've used it a couple of times.
We have just a little tweak, and then it's in.
Yeah, and it's nothing gets thrown out aside from the previous 15 editions,
which were trashed,
absolute trash. They are. So the Carrion-Priests are a little bit bestial, and they're all a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have them as... one of the interesting things about the Carrion-Priest is how they do really weird shit. So, if I actually were not on the really weird shit, I want to talk about the the normal stuff they've got here. One of their low-level abilities, called Dead Flesh, gives them +2 rep, and also they can undecay rotted or spoiled food. They can make food safe to eat. And one of the things when I was starting out writing this, I wanted all of the low-level abilities to, if it was like a divine spell, I wanted them to arise from day-to-day worship of the deity. Like, I wanted them to be like weaponized existing rotes, rather than this is a spell which the cleric has blessed you with, which your god has blessed you with. It's more, well, actually, let's say the rite of shadowed sanctuary is a ministry spell, and that lets you stop anyone from leaving a room by marking it with spire black, basically slapping ink all over the walls. And I like the way that's also one of their ways of sanctifying a prayer space.
Mm.
And so Dead Flesh is really important to them, to the Charnelites, because they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of food, and so having someone who can make your food good is a really important thing, and so you have that rep.
It makes them important in their community.
Yeah, I will also say that having the ability to have +2 rep is so useful for just having powers that don't have much in-game effect.
Yeah.
Like the Knight's Rowboat.
Yeah, because being able to soak things in rep is so powerful.
Like it depends how you play your class. But you can ask anyone to do anything, and whether or not they'll do it is up to them and the dice you throw. But you might as well take hits to rep, because all you're going to do is get embarrassed and kicked out rather than have your leg chewed off.
Yeah, that's very true. Which is especially worrying if it's chewed off by a Carrion-Priest.
Yeah, that's fair. So the Carrion-Priest is ironically a bit of a hunter.
Yeah.
I think, I like to think of them as sort of agents of Charnel, in that Charnel never hunts. These people hunt and dedicate things to Charnel.
Yeah.
And also because just waiting until your enemy dies doesn't make for a really fun character class.
No, not.
As the sniper fight in Metal Gear Solid 3 proved. Little video game joke for you there.
But there's some interesting powers in the Carrion-Priest.
Mm.
Under medium, you've got Ghost Speaker.
Yeah.
Now, if you've been reading with us up to this point, you'll notice ghosts haven't really cropped up.
No.
And they
don't really crop up ever again.
They don't really... Well, they do. There's certain districts that focus on them. But it's interesting because what this does is this... If I take Ghost Speaker, it forms the DM.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm interested in this type of story.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting way of going about it. Like, look, this is what I'm interested in, guys. Can we maybe put some of this in?
Yeah, and also we informed that in mechanically by saying, in addition, once per session, you find a ghost and talk to them about the present situation.
Yeah, so it gives you control there as well.
It gives you that power, that control. The hyena is kind of fun. We used to have the hyena as a separate character. and then we boiled them down to a series of tricks and buffs because they were just easier than running the numbers.
Yeah, it was the most gamey part of the game.
Yeah. I will also say I really like their when you enter a dangerous situation power.
Yes.
So it's called Lay of the Land, and what you do when you enter a dangerous situation, you can name up to 3 features or opportunities that your allies can take advantage of, and then it's then you get to roll with mastery. You get to roll an extra d10 when you use the thing the first time. But it means that when you go into a combat situation or a tense situation or something which you might have to shoot or fight your way out of, the Carrion-Priest is like, all right, and then they scan. And then it lets their player list stuff about the arena without having to actually play it out.
Yeah,
without having to draw a map. And that's just that stuff we've tried to push over and take some strain off the GM and put some responsibility back on players.
Yeah, and again, make not just responsibility, but it makes them feel more involved.
Yes, for sure.
You know, more tied to the world.
I will say, I think my favourite power from Carrion-Priest is Taste Life. Because you get to eat the domains out of people.
Yeah.
Because you permanently gain a domain if you eat someone with that domain. And I really like the idea of the Carrion-Priest wanting to learn something. They're going and eating a scholar.
I like the idea that they don't really want to.
Yeah, it's up to the individual.
Yeah,
and it's when you eat the flesh of a recently dead creature. You don't have to eat the whole thing.
No, but you have to eat some.
Yeah. But that works for me, and also they get into more compared to the Bound, one of the last classes we talked about. They're much more obvious in their religion, in their spells.
Yes,
so, they can turn into a crow. They can turn into a sort of half man, half hyena thing. They can summon weapons. They can summon crows, which peck the shit out of people.
Ew.
Yeah. Well, eyes.
Yeah, no, still air.
Yeah. But that's I really I like how Spire they feel as well. They feel very Spire. And also
they've got a nice image as well because they live in New Heaven, which is on top of Spire, so they've got to wrap up against the sun. Yeah.
Plus they're refugees. Is the other thing. Like they are rather than refugees from the home nations, they're refugees from Alakam to the south. They are. We haven't quite worked out why. But I like to imagine that the Duchess of Alakam drove them out for some reason.
Yeah.
Who knows? The Duchess of Alakam, she rides a big goat, and I've named her many times and never really described her.
Couldn't go without having a goat in there.
I've got to have goats everywhere. I can't wait till we get to the goats appendix.
Oh God.
Let's move on. The Spire Director's Commentary podcast is a companion to the Spire RPG and features Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. The music is by Arokia, hosted on freesound.org and used under the Creative Commons license. To learn more about Spire, explore related products or buy your own copy, go to rowanrookanddecard.com.